Welcome back to The Mentors. This is Vadim.
And Sergey.
And you're listening to our weekly segment called the 5-Minute Pick-Me-Up, where we tell you 5-minute entrepreneurial stories to help motivate you for the week to come.
And today we were reading an article that our older brother sent us about this concept called workism. It's something that they wrote about in The Atlantic, and it's this whole idea that even though in the past we were told that in the future people would be working less as technology would automate more things, in fact, the current culture is that we're always trying to work as much as possible. And in fact, there was a ton of pressure to do work that's really meaningful and that has a huge purpose. And if you're not doing that, you feel like you're falling short and you're wasting your life. And we're here to say that based on our experience, we're going to tell you one particular story about my former boss, Andrew Yang, that a lot of times people get successful by first focusing on something small and not necessarily revolutionary. Now, Andrew is not a guy who doesn't think big. In fact, he's now running for president at the age of 43 as a Democrat, and he's actually making some noise. He was on the Joe Rogan podcast last week. He's been written up and shown on The Guardian, on Fox, on tons of different news networks. So he's definitely worked his way up and now thinks big. But when he first started off, when he was in his 20s, he tried a business idea that actually was a huge idea, and the idea was to involve major celebrities and athletes to run campaigns that then would give back for good causes, essentially. And it would be basically big marketing campaigns. And he raised a bunch of money, and that idea ended up failing because it didn't make that much money, or there was no direct path to revenue during the dot-com boom. That's when he was working on it. And he didn't end up being successful in business until he started a smaller one later on. He spent a couple years working in software sales, and a friend of his was running a GMAT preparation business, so teaching people how to do well in the GMAT so they can get into graduate school. And the guy was sick of running that business, and he asked if Andrew wanted to take it over. And so he took over the small business. Not something that seems like a big idea, right? Well, he took that business and grew it to be one of the biggest GMAT training businesses out there. His company ended up writing a book about it that sold really well. They had interesting, unique processes on growing and training the team so that their teachers were the best. And he ended up selling that company years later, I think like 5 years later, to Kaplan for many millions of dollars and became wealthy that way. And then he started thinking bigger and bigger, ended up starting Venture for America, and now he is running for president. So goes to show that you don't have to start with a revolutionary idea, and sometimes it's better to start with something smaller.
There's part of an article that was called The Gospel of Work, and that basically, because of the decline of traditional faith, specifically in America, people are essentially now replacing that by making the work culture and whatever the bigger purpose, their faith, if you will, right? Kind of like a religion. And the thing is, when you put so much pressure on yourself to succeed, to find a passion, to become rich or whatever it is, you kind of start having blinders and you don't really necessarily see opportunities, and you are going to find that things are very, very difficult and you're not going to be happy ultimately. We always talk about how you need to have wins in order to be happy. And that's why Andrew's story is so compelling. Yes, in the beginning he focused on something bigger, and ultimately, even though he did raise money, it wasn't a successful business because you can't really build a business unless there's revenue and customers. Once he did identify a smaller opportunity or more niche opportunity, but somewhere where he could directly add value, he started having positive experiences, experiencing those wins, and ultimately becoming wealthy through the process. So as you're thinking about your own contribution to the world, think a little bit smaller, because that's where you can have wins faster, and eventually later on you can turn it into bigger idea. We actually talked about this with Praful Mathur in an episode we did with him called How to Think Big by Starting Small. So if you want to hear us diving a little bit deeper into this subject, check out that episode.
And another important takeaway is that if you just constantly keep on thinking of the next thing and trying to look for the thing that's going to be a bigger idea and a bigger idea, you're just never going to get started. Something that we talked a little bit about in our very early episode about how to finally get started, right? How to get unstuck. Think about that when you next time you think about what business should you dive into. If you see that there's an interesting opportunity to make money, start with that, and it can eventually evolve into something bigger. That's it for the 5-minute pick-me-up, and we'll see you on Wednesday with a return episode with the lovely Olga Nesterova, who we had is actually one of our first interviewees that we had. She has a really cool update for you. She's the world champion dancer who started her own dance company. Tune in on Wednesday.
Have a great week.